Marcus had already said goodbye twice, which in his professional opinion was one goodbye too many for a job that mostly involved delivering sealed messages and pretending not to overhear galactic secrets. The third farewell was forming on his lips when the docking bay doors slid open again with a soft, dramatic hiss that suggested someone very important, or very inconvenient, had just entered. He didn't turn immediately. Experience had taught him that sudden movements in alien palaces often triggered either security protocols or ceremonial music, both of which he preferred to avoid. But the silence that followed was different. It wasn't the respectful quiet of attendance. It was the kind of silence that made your instincts whisper, "You are not leaving today." Marcus exhaled slowly and turned. Queen Valia stood at the entrance of the bay, her presence cutting through the polished expanse like a deliberate thought. Her long, elegant ears angled slightly back, catching the glow of the overhead crystalline lights. She looked, as always, strikingly human at first glance, until you noticed the subtle precision in her features, the stillness in her posture, the way her gaze seemed to measure more than just what was visible. Marcus gave a polite nod, the kind that said, "I respect your authority, but I also have a ship to catch." "Your Majesty," he said, offering a practiced smile. "I was just about to leave," she finished calmly. "That was the plan," Marcus replied. "A revolutionary concept, I know." For a brief moment, something flickered in her expression. Not quite amusement, but close enough to make him feel slightly less doomed. "Marcus," she said, stepping closer, dismissing the attendants behind her with a subtle gesture. The doors sealed shut, leaving the vast bay suddenly far too private. That was when Marcus's internal alarms began ringing, not the loud panic kind, more like a quiet, persistent chime that said this conversation is about to ruin your day. "Yes?" he asked carefully. Valia stopped a few steps away from him, her gaze steady. "Are you aware," she began, her tone even, almost conversational, "that you left me pregnant?" Marcus blinked. There were, in his experience, many sentences one could hear at the end of a diplomatic mission. "Safe travels. We appreciate your service. Please do not return." This was not one of them. "I'm sorry," Marcus said after a moment, because it seemed like the safest possible response. "I think my translator just tried to resign." "It is functioning correctly," Valia replied. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "Right. Good. That's good to know." Silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Marcus searched his memory with increasing urgency, flipping through weeks of protocol, meetings, and carefully neutral interactions, until his thoughts collided with one very specific night. The festival, bright lights, unfamiliar music, a drink that had tasted like citrus and poor decisions. Valia, not as a distant queen, but as a woman laughing freely among her people. And Marcus, who had been just reckless enough to forget that some moments didn't stay in the past. "Oh," he said softly. "Yes," Valia confirmed. Marcus rubbed his face with both hands, as if that might reorganize reality into something more manageable. "Okay. Hypothetically," he began, lowering his hands, "if someone had made a culturally enthusiastic mistake several months ago, wouldn't there have been, I don't know, a notification system?" Valia tilted her head slightly. "You were notified." "I was not," Marcus said immediately. "You were invited to remain for an extended stay," she replied. "I thought that was politeness," Marcus said. "You know, stay as long as you like, which universally means, please leave soon. That is not how it is interpreted here." Marcus let out a slow breath. "Of course it isn't." Valia studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable, but not unkind. "You are not under arrest," she said. "That's reassuring," Marcus replied, "because this feels exactly like the start of an arrest. You are, however, not permitted to depart," she continued. "There it is," Marcus muttered. "Until matters of paternity and intent are established," Valia finished. Marcus stared at her, then at his ship, then back at her. "Intent," he repeated. "I assume that's the part where I convincingly explain I didn't plan this?" "That will be part of it," Valia said. He hesitated, then asked, "And the other part?" Valia's gaze softened, just slightly. Determining what you will do now. Marcus let that settle, the weight of it pressing in quietly. This wasn't a trap. It wasn't an accusation. It was something far more complicated and far more real. He looked down at his small travel case, suddenly feeling absurdly unprepared. Well, he said after a moment, forcing a faint smile, I suppose canceling my departure is going to require more paperwork than I expected. Valya's lips curved, just barely. Consider it your most important delivery. Marcus sighed, glancing once more at the ship that was no longer his exit. Next time, he said, I'm choosing assignments with less long-term consequences. Valya raised an eyebrow. There will not be a next time like this. Marcus nodded slowly. That's what I'm afraid of. Marcus discovered very quickly that not being under arrest and not being allowed to leave were, in practice, almost identical experiences, just with better furniture. The suite they assigned him overlooked a vast inner courtyard where alien flora shimmered in shifting colors, reacting to unseen frequencies. It was beautiful, calm, and entirely useless to someone who had just had his entire life redirected by a single sentence. Marcus stood in the center of the room, turning slowly, as if an escape route might reveal itself if he rotated enough times. It did not. He set his travel case down with the careful resignation of a man acknowledging temporary defeat. All right, he muttered to himself. Step 1, don't panic. Step 2, figure out what intent means before someone hands you a contract labeled lifelong responsibility. The door chimed softly. Marcus turned. If that's the part where someone says, good news, it was a misunderstanding, I'm emotionally ready for that. The door opened. It was not that part. 3 individuals entered, 2 wearing the unmistakable attire of scientists and 1 carrying a tablet that looked far too official for comfort. Their movements were precise, their expressions neutral in the way that suggested they had already decided everything important. Marcus Hale, the one with the tablet said. That's me, Marcus replied. Still me, hoping to remain just me. We are here to initiate verification protocols, the scientist continued. Marcus crossed his arms lightly. Verification sounds harmless. I verify things all the time. Messages, signatures, occasionally my own sanity. This concerns biological confirmation, the second scientist added. Marcus paused. Ah, he said, the glowing blue test. All 3 looked at him. That was a joke, Marcus clarified. Mostly. It is not entirely inaccurate, the tablet holder admitted. Marcus let out a small laugh. Of course it isn't. They gestured toward a device that had silently extended from the wall, its surface alive with faint pulses of light. It resembled a cross between medical equipment and something that might also judge his life choices. Place your hand here, one of them instructed. Marcus stepped closer, eyeing the device. Before I do that, quick question. This won't, I don't know, absorb my memories or assign me a second job, will it? It will not, the scientist said. Good, Marcus replied, placing his hand on the surface. Because I'm currently overbooked. The device hummed, a low, resonant vibration that traveled up his arm. Patterns of light shifted beneath his skin, as if something was mapping him at a level far beyond ordinary biology. Marcus watched, fascinated despite himself. You know, he said, on Earth, this usually involves a swab and a very awkward silence. This method is more efficient, the tablet holder replied. I'm sure it is, Marcus said, also significantly more intimidating. The hum intensified briefly, then faded. The device retracted as smoothly as it had appeared, leaving Marcus standing there, hands still raised as if unsure whether to trust the absence of sensation. That's it? He asked. For now, the scientist said. Marcus lowered his hand slowly. I expected more dramatic lighting. There will be a full resonance analysis, the second scientist explained. Results will require time. Marcus nodded. Time I apparently have in abundance. They began to leave, but Marcus raised a hand. Wait, one more thing. They paused. Hypothetically, he said, choosing his words carefully, if the results confirm what we're all strongly suspecting, what happens next? The 3 exchanged a brief glance. Then discussions of responsibility and rights will proceed, the tablet holder said. Marcus smiled faintly. That sounds like a conversation where I should definitely bring snacks. It is considered a serious matter, the scientist replied. I gathered that, Marcus said. I just perform better when I'm not terrified. For a moment there was silence again, less heavy this time, but still charged with everything unsaid. Then they left. Marcus stood alone once more, the quiet of the suite settling around him. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. Verification protocols, he muttered. Great. Next comes existential crisis protocols. The door chimed again. Marcus looked up, half expecting another team of specialists. If this is about my intent, I'd like to formally declare that I intend to understand what's happening before I panic. The door opened. Valia stepped inside. Marcus straightened instinctively, then relaxed just as quickly. Your Majesty, he said, please tell me you're here with simpler explanations than the scientists. Valia regarded him quietly, then walked further into the room. I wish to see how you were adjusting. Marcus considered that for a moment. Define adjusting, he said, because if it means accepting that my departure has been indefinitely postponed due to unexpected parenthood, then I'd say I'm progressing at a pace best described as cautious disbelief. A faint curve touched Valia's lips. That is a reasonable response, she said. Marcus leaned back against the edge of a table. I keep thinking there's a version of this where I wake up and realize this was all a very specific nightmare caused by alien festival drinks. There is not, Valia replied. Worth checking, Marcus said. She studied him again, more closely this time. You are not angry, she observed. Marcus shrugged slightly. Confused? Yes. Overwhelmed? Definitely. But angry? He hesitated. No, you didn't hide it. You told me directly. Valia inclined her head. You deserve that. Marcus met her gaze. And now? Now, Valia said, we wait for confirmation, and then we decide. Marcus nodded slowly, the weight of that settling deeper than before. Well, he said after a moment, forcing a small smile, in that case, I suppose I should start getting used to the idea that my schedule has changed. Valia's expression softened, just enough to be noticeable. Yes, she said. It has. Time, Marcus decided, behaved very differently when you were waiting to find out if you were about to become a father in an alien empire. It stretched in odd directions, slowed in the wrong moments, and accelerated whenever he tried to avoid thinking. He had been in the palace for 3 days, or 4, possibly 6. The clocks on this world did not follow Earth logic, and the polite assistant who had tried to explain the local time system had given up halfway through when Marcus asked if there was a version that involved hours, minutes, and emotional stability. There was not. So Marcus adapted. Poorly. He stood now in a long, open corridor overlooking the inner gardens, watching plants that responded to sound. Every time someone spoke, the leaves shimmered faintly, like they were quietly judging the conversation. I feel like I'm being evaluated by vegetation, Marcus muttered. They are not evaluating you, came a calm voice behind him. Marcus didn't jump. He had learned not to jump. Jumping attracted attention, and attention led to conversations. And conversations often contained life-altering revelations. He turned instead, slowly. Valia approached, her steps measured, her presence as composed as ever. The soft light caught the edges of her long ears, highlighting their delicate curve. She looked less like a distant queen now, and more like someone who had been thinking too much. Are you certain? Marcus asked, gesturing toward the plants. Because that one definitely reacted when I said something embarrassing earlier. It reacts to sound frequency, not content, Valia replied. Marcus nodded. Good. That means it didn't understand me. That's a relief. Valia stopped beside him, her gaze shifting briefly toward the garden before returning to him. You are restless. That's a polite way of saying I've walked the same corridor 14 times, Marcus said. I counted. Then I lost count and had to start over. It's been a productive experience. You could request activities, she suggested. I did, Marcus replied. Your advisor offered me a cultural lecture that lasted 2 hours and included a detailed explanation of ceremonial footwear. Valia's expression shifted slightly. It is an important topic. I'm sure it is, Marcus said. but I'm trying to process unexpected parenthood, not design formal shoes. For a moment, silence settled between them, softer this time. Valya glanced at him again. You are handling this better than expected. Marcus let out a quiet laugh. That's because I've reached the phase where my brain has accepted that panicking won't change anything. And before that? Oh, there was definitely a phase where I considered hiding in my ship and pretending none of this was real, Marcus admitted. But your guards seem very committed to their jobs. They are, Valya said. Marcus tilted his head slightly. You knew I wouldn't leave. Valya met his gaze. I knew you would not run. That's a very generous assumption, Marcus said. It is an observation, she corrected. Marcus considered that, then looked back at the garden. You don't seem surprised by any of this, he said. Valya was quiet for a moment before answering. I am not unfamiliar with responsibility arriving unplanned. Marcus glanced at her. That sounds like experience speaking. It is, she said simply. He shifted his weight slightly, folding his arms. Are you worried? Valya didn't answer immediately. Yes, she said at last. It was the first time she had said something without precision, without careful framing. Just a simple, honest word. Marcus nodded slowly. Good, he said. Valya blinked once. Good? Yeah, Marcus replied. Because if you weren't worried, I'd be more concerned. That earned him a faint, almost reluctant smile. I have concerns, she said. So do I, Marcus replied. For example, I still don't know if your version of parenting involves anything I should be warned about. Do children here develop faster? Slower? Do they, I don't know, start issuing royal decrees at age 3? Valya's eyes held a trace of amusement. They do not. Good, Marcus said, because I was not prepared to negotiate with a toddler. They require guidance, she added. Marcus nodded. That sounds familiar. Humans require guidance too. Most of us just ignore it. Valya studied him again, her gaze lingering longer this time. You speak as if you are already considering this. Marcus exhaled quietly. It's hard not to, he said. Every time I try to think about leaving, it feels... He hesitated. Unresolved, Valya offered. Exactly that, Marcus said. Like walking away from something before understanding it. Valya's expression softened again, subtly. The results will come soon, she said. Marcus nodded. I know. And when they do, she continued, you will have a choice. Marcus looked at her, really looked this time. Not as a queen, not as a situation, but as a person standing in the same uncertainty. Choices are funny, he said quietly. Everyone talks about them like they're simple, but sometimes they're just different kinds of complicated. Valya inclined her head slightly. That is true. Marcus glanced back at the garden, where the plants shimmered faintly as a distant voice echoed through the corridor. Well, he said, at least I won't be making the decision alone. Valya didn't respond immediately, but she didn't look away either. No, she said after a moment. You will not. Marcus nodded, a small, steady movement. Good, he said, because I'm going to need someone to explain the footwear customs again if I stay. Valya's lips curved just enough to be seen. I will ensure a shorter explanation, she said. Marcus let out a quiet breath, something in his shoulders easing for the first time since the docking bay. Thank you, he said. And for once, the waiting didn't feel quite as heavy. The summons came without warning, which Marcus was beginning to suspect was a cultural preference rather than an oversight. One moment he was attempting to understand a wall display that rearranged itself every time he blinked, and the next, the door chimed with the unmistakable tone of official inevitability. Marcus didn't move immediately. He stared at the door. The door in return remained confidently closed. This is it, he muttered. This is where my life becomes significantly more complicated. The chime sounded again, a little more insistent this time. Marcus exhaled, straightened his posture like someone about to face consequences, and stepped forward. Come in, he said, bracing himself for either scientists or paperwork. The door opened. It was both. 3 officials entered, accompanied by the same scientists he had met before. The tablet-bearing one stood at the front again, holding what looked like a thin crystalline panel that pulsed faintly with internal light. Marcus pointed at it. "That's glowing," he said. "I'm not saying that's suspicious, but it's definitely not comforting." "It is the result matrix," the official replied. Marcus nodded slowly. "Of course it is." Valya entered behind them, her presence quiet but unmistakable. The room shifted the moment she stepped inside, not because of authority, but because everything suddenly felt more focused. Marcus noticed the way her expression was composed, but not distant. There was something else there now, something he hadn't seen before. Expectation. Marcus swallowed lightly and stepped aside. "Should I sit, stand, dramatically brace myself against something?" "Standing is sufficient," one of the scientists said. "Good," Marcus replied. "Less risk of falling over from shock." The crystalline panel was placed on a central surface, and the room dimmed slightly as if the environment itself wanted to participate in the moment. Lines of light began to move across the panel, forming patterns that Marcus absolutely did not understand. He leaned slightly toward the nearest scientist. "Quick question. Is there a version of this where someone just says the result in simple words?" "There is," the scientist replied. Marcus relaxed slightly. "Great. I vote for that version." The patterns intensified, converging into a single point of bright blue light. Marcus stared at it. "That's very blue," he said quietly. "Yes," the scientist confirmed. "And blue means—" The scientist paused, as if surprised the question still needed answering. "It confirms genetic alignment." Marcus blinked once. "That's a very official way of saying—" "Yes," Valya said softly. Marcus let out a slow breath, his shoulders dropping just slightly. He looked at the glowing panel again, then at Valya, then back at the panel. "Well," he said after a moment, "at least it didn't explode. I was genuinely concerned about that." No one spoke. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. "Right. Probably not the moment for humor." Valya's gaze remained on him, steady but not cold. "It is acceptable," she said. "Good," Marcus replied, "because I'm going to need it." The officials began quietly recording the results, their movements efficient, almost routine. For them, this was a process. For Marcus, it was a turning point. He looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers slightly, as if expecting them to feel different. "They don't feel like father hands," he murmured. "They are still your hands," Valya said. Marcus glanced at her. "That's reassuring. I wasn't ready for a sudden transformation." A faint hint of amusement passed through her expression again, brief but real. The tablet holder stepped forward. "With confirmation established, proceedings regarding parental intent and legal positioning will begin." Marcus raised a hand. "Proceedings sounds intense." "It is a formal process," the official replied. Marcus nodded. "Of course it is. Everything here is formal." "There are options available to you," the official continued. "You may choose to remain and participate in co-parenting, or you may fulfill your obligations and depart under defined conditions." Marcus looked at him. Defined conditions sounds like something with a lot of fine print. "There is documentation," the official confirmed. Marcus sighed. "Naturally." Valya stepped closer then, her attention shifting fully to Marcus. The others faded into the background, not physically, but in importance. "You are not bound," she said. "You will decide." Marcus met her gaze, searching for something. Pressure, expectation, anything that might push him in one direction or another. He found none. Just honesty. "That almost makes it harder," he said quietly. Valya tilted her head slightly. "Why?" "Because if I were forced," Marcus replied, "I could blame the situation. But if I choose—" He hesitated, then let out a small breath. "Then it's on me." Valya held his gaze. "Yes." Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing that. The room seemed quieter now, even with the officials still present. "So," Marcus said after a moment, glancing once more at the glowing blue result, "this is real." "It is," Valya said. He let out a small, almost disbelieving laugh. "I came here to deliver a message," he said, "and now I'm part of one." Valya didn't respond immediately, but there was something in her expression that softened further, something less guarded. Marcus straightened slightly, looking between her and the officials. "All right," he said. "What happens next?" The tablet holder stepped forward again, ready to explain procedures, timelines, and responsibilities. But Marcus's attention stayed on Valia, because for the first time, it didn't feel like he was just waiting for instructions. It felt like he was about to make a choice. Marcus had expected many things after the confirmation: long speeches, complicated contracts, possibly a ceremonial robe he would refuse to wear, but he had not expected to be invited to discuss nursery designs. He stood in a wide chamber filled with floating projections, each one displaying a different interpretation of what could only be described as the most advanced baby room in the galaxy. One projection showed a softly glowing environment with adjustable gravity fields. Another presented a cradle that gently hovered, rotating just enough to optimize developmental orientation, whatever that meant. A third appeared to be a small fortress. Marcus pointed at that one. "Why does that look like it could survive a siege?" "It can," one advisor replied. Marcus blinked. "Of course it can." Valia stood beside him, arms loosely folded, observing the projections with the calm focus of someone who had ruled an empire, but was now being asked to choose between 16 variations of comfort lighting. "The child does not require defensive structures," she said. The advisor inclined his head. "It is a precaution." Marcus nodded slowly. "I feel like your version of precaution and my version are very different things." Valia glanced at him. "Explain." "My version is like corner protectors and maybe a soft blanket," Marcus said. "Not a miniature fortress with shield generators." "It is a modest shield," the advisor added. Marcus let out a quiet breath. "That sentence worries me more than it should." The projections shifted again, rearranging themselves as if trying to impress them. Marcus stepped closer to one that displayed a more simple design: soft colors, stable surfaces, nothing that looked like it might accidentally activate. "This one," he said. "This looks normal." Valia studied it. "Define normal." Marcus hesitated. "Less likely to start a small war." She considered that, then gave a small nod. "Acceptable." The advisors immediately began adjusting parameters, their hands moving through the air as if shaping reality itself. Marcus watched them for a moment, then leaned slightly toward Valia. "I didn't expect to be involved in this," he admitted. "You are involved," she said. Marcus gave a faint smile. "I'm starting to notice." They moved through the chamber together, the conversation shifting from projections to more practical matters: medical care, developmental timelines, education systems that sounded far more advanced than anything Marcus had experienced. "At what age do they begin formal learning?" Marcus asked. "Early," Valia replied. "Cognitive development is encouraged from the beginning." Marcus nodded. "Same on Earth, although we usually start with simpler things: colors, shapes, not interstellar diplomacy." "That comes later," she said. "Good," Marcus replied. "I'd like to be prepared before I help with homework that involves negotiating trade routes." Valia's lips curved slightly. They paused near a display that showed a timeline of development, glowing markers indicating key stages. Marcus studied it, his expression more thoughtful now. "This is real," he said quietly. Valia did not respond immediately. "It has been real," she said after a moment. Marcus nodded. "Yeah, I'm just catching up." Silence settled again, but it wasn't heavy. It felt grounded. One of the advisors approached cautiously. "There is also the matter of designation," he said. Marcus turned. "Designation?" "The child's official status," the advisor clarified. "Titles, lineage acknowledgement." Marcus raised a hand. Right. Important things." Valia stepped forward slightly. "That discussion will occur later." The advisor inclined his head and stepped back. Marcus watched him go, then glanced at Valia. "That sounded like a complicated conversation." "It will be," she said. Marcus exhaled softly. "Good thing I'm getting practice." They continued walking, slower now. "I keep expecting this to feel wrong," Marcus admitted after a while. "Like I'm out of place." Valia looked at him. "And does it?" Marcus thought about it. A little, he said, but less than before. Valya nodded once, as if that answer mattered more than anything else he could have said. Marcus gestured toward the projections again. You know, back home, people argue about things like wall colors and toys, not gravitational stability. You may still argue about colors, Valya said. Marcus smiled faintly. Good, I have strong opinions about colors. I have noticed, she replied. He glanced at her. That sounded like there's a story behind it. You disagreed with the ceremonial banners, she said. Marcus let out a small laugh. They were too symmetrical. They were intentionally symmetrical. Exactly, Marcus said. Valya shook her head slightly, the motion subtle but unmistakably amused. They stopped again, this time near a projection that had settled into a balanced design. Neither overly complex nor overly simple. Marcus looked at it, then at her. This one feels right. Valya studied it for a moment, then nodded. It does. The decision was small, in the grand scale of everything that was happening. But it felt significant. Marcus crossed his arms loosely, his gaze lingering on the projection. I didn't plan any of this, he said. Nor did I, Valya replied. Marcus nodded. But here we are. Valya's eyes remained on the projection, but her voice softened slightly. Yes. Marcus glanced at her, then back at the future they were quietly beginning to shape. Well, he said after a moment, if we're doing this, we might as well do it properly. Valya turned her head just enough to meet his gaze. We will, she said. And for the first time, Marcus didn't feel like a visitor anymore. Marcus had learned many things during his time in the palace. He had learned how to navigate corridors that subtly rearranged themselves. He had learned that alien advisors took nursery design more seriously than most governments took treaties. And most importantly, he had learned that thinking too much alone was a dangerous activity. Unfortunately, he was currently doing exactly that. He stood on one of the upper terraces, overlooking the vast city that stretched far beyond the palace walls. Lights shimmered in layered patterns, hovering structures drifting slowly in the distance, like quiet thoughts that refused to settle. It was beautiful in a way that made everything feel larger, and his situation feel very, very real. Marcus leaned forward slightly against the railing. All right, he muttered. Let's organize this. He raised a finger. Option 1, leave. Return to a normal life. Pretend this was an extremely complicated assignment. He lowered the finger. Option 2, stay. Become part of something I definitely did not plan for. He paused. None of which also involves learning alien parenting, legal systems, and possibly ceremonial footwear. He sighed. Neither of these options comes with a guidebook. That seems unfair. You are speaking to yourself again? Marcus didn't turn immediately. He had started to recognize Valya's presence before she spoke. The subtle shift in the air, the quiet way the space seemed to settle. Only when I need intelligent conversation, he replied. It's been very helpful so far. Valya stepped beside him, her gaze moving out toward the city. And what conclusions have you reached? Marcus considered that for a moment. That I am very good at listing problems, he said, less good at solving them. That is a common condition, she replied. Marcus nodded. Good, I was worried it was just me. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt necessary. Valya spoke first this time. You are uncertain. Marcus let out a quiet breath. That's a very diplomatic way of saying I have no idea what I'm doing. She turned her head slightly. Do you believe anyone does? Marcus thought about it, then shook his head. No, but most people at least pretend convincingly. Valya's lips curved faintly. That is also a common condition. Marcus glanced at her, then back at the city. I keep thinking about leaving, he admitted. Not because I want to run, just because it's what I was supposed to do. Valya did not interrupt. It's simple, Marcus continued. I finish the assignment. I go home. I move on. That's how this works. And now? She asked. Marcus hesitated. Now it doesn't feel simple anymore, he said. Valya's gaze remained steady. Because of the child? Marcus nodded slowly. Because of everything. He turned slightly, facing her more directly. I didn't expect to care this much about something I didn't plan. Valia held his gaze, her expression softer than it had been at any point before. Care is not dependent on planning. Marcus let out a small, humorless laugh. That would have been useful information earlier. You would not have believed it, she said. Oh, that's fair, Marcus admitted. The city lights shifted below them, reflecting faintly in her eyes. I do not expect you to stay, Valia said quietly. Marcus blinked once. You don't? No, she replied. I expect you to choose. Marcus studied her, searching for any sign of pressure, of expectation hidden beneath her words. There was none. That's a lot of trust, he said. It is not trust, she said. It is respect. Marcus exhaled slowly, the weight of that settling deeper than anything else she had said. I'm afraid, he admitted. Valia did not look away. Of what? Marcus ran a hand through his hair. Of making the wrong decision, of staying and not being enough, of leaving and regretting it. Valia listened without interruption, her posture steady. That is not one fear, she said after a moment. That is many. Marcus let out a small laugh. I like to be thorough. Valia's expression softened again. Fear does not mean you are unprepared. Marcus shook his head slightly. It feels like it does. It means you understand the weight of what is before you, she said. Marcus looked at her. Really looked this time. And you, he asked. Are you afraid? Valia paused. Yes, she said. Marcus nodded slowly. Good. That makes two of us. A faint smile touched her lips. Marcus turned back toward the city, resting his hands on the railing again. You know, when I first arrived here, I was just trying to complete a delivery without offending anyone. You succeeded, Valia said. Marcus glanced at her. I'm not entirely sure about that. You did not offend me, she replied. Marcus smiled faintly. That's because you didn't know what was coming. Valia almost laughed. The moment lingered, light but real. Marcus straightened slightly, his expression shifting. Not fully certain, not fully resolved, but different. I don't have an answer yet, he said. I know, Valia replied. But I think... He hesitated, then continued. I think I'm starting to understand the question. Valia inclined her head slightly. That is a beginning. Marcus nodded. Yeah, he said quietly. It is. And for the first time, the future didn't feel like something he was trying to escape. It felt like something he was slowly, carefully deciding whether to step into. Marcus stood once again in the docking bay where all of this had begun, except this time nothing felt the same. The ship was ready, systems active, clearance granted. Every indicator suggested departure was not only possible, but expected. That was the problem. He looked at the open ramp, then down at the small case in his hand. It felt lighter than before, though he knew nothing inside it had changed. What had changed was everything else. You have delayed your departure 3 times. Marcus didn't turn immediately. I like to be consistent, he replied. If I'm going to hesitate, I commit to it properly. Valia stepped closer, her presence steady, familiar now in a way that would have been unthinkable days ago. The light of the bay traced along the edges of her long ears, her expression composed but no longer distant. The transport window will not remain open indefinitely, she said. Marcus nodded. I figured. Space travel tends to frown on indecision. Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was full of everything they had already said, and everything they didn't need to repeat. Marcus finally turned, facing her fully. I've been thinking, he said. I am aware, Valia replied. Marcus smiled faintly. Of course you are. He took a breath, then exhaled slowly, as if releasing the last of something he had been holding on to. When I arrived here, he began, I had a plan. Deliver the message, stay out of trouble, leave. Simple. He glanced briefly at the ship, then back at her. Turns out I'm not as good at simple as I thought. Valia watched him quietly. I kept telling myself I could go back, Marcus continued. Back to what I understand. Back to what I planned. But every time I tried to picture that, It felt incomplete. He shifted his weight slightly, his grip on the case loosening. I thought staying meant giving something up, he said, but it doesn't feel like that anymore. Valya's gaze softened, just slightly. What does it feel like? She asked. Marcus met her eyes. It feels like choosing something, he said. The words settled between them, quiet but certain. Valya held his gaze, searching, not for hesitation, but for truth. You understand what that choice requires, she said. Marcus nodded. Yeah, responsibility, uncertainty, probably more discussions about advanced nursery technology. That is likely, she admitted. Marcus smiled. I'm still not agreeing to the defensive fortress crib. It remains an option, she said. Let's call it a last resort, Marcus replied. A faint hint of amusement passed between them, easing the weight of the moment just enough. Marcus looked down at the case in his hand. Then, without hesitation this time, he set it on the ground beside him. The sound was soft but final. Valya's eyes followed the movement. You are staying, she said. Marcus nodded once. Yeah. Not forced, not obligated, chosen. I don't know exactly what I'm doing, he added. I'm probably going to make mistakes, a lot of them. That is expected, Valya said. Marcus let out a small breath. Good, because I'd hate to disappoint you this early. Valya stepped closer, closing the space between them in a way that no longer felt formal. You will not face it alone, she said. Marcus looked at her, and for the first time, the weight of everything ahead didn't feel overwhelming. It felt shared. That helps, he said quietly. Behind them, the ship's systems emitted a soft tone, a final reminder that departure was still an option. Marcus glanced back at it one last time. Then he turned away. I guess I should inform someone I'm canceling my exit, he said. Is there a form for that? Or do I just dramatically walk away and hope someone understands? There will be documentation, Valya said. Of course there will, Marcus replied. They began to walk together, away from the ship, away from the version of the future Marcus had originally planned. After a few steps, Marcus glanced at her again. So, he said, hypothetically, how early is too early to start learning how to be a parent in an alien empire? Valya considered the question. It is already time, she said. Marcus nodded slowly. Right. No pressure. There will be pressure, she added. Marcus smiled faintly. I figured. They continued forward, the vast corridors of the palace opening before them, not as something unfamiliar anymore, but as something he was beginning to belong to. Marcus exhaled, a steady, grounded breath. You know, he said, this is definitely not how I expected this mission to end. Valya glanced at him. Is that a regret? Marcus thought about it, then shook his head. No, he said, and this time there was no hesitation at all.